Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the sanctuary here in Austin, Texas. I'm Mike Robertson, the pastor. I want to welcome you and thank you for choosing to spend a little bit of your time with us here this Sunday morning. I appreciate it so much. Announcement-wise, I don't have a lot to share with you. Of course, every week is very much like the last one here lately. If you'd like to participate in our Wednesday night Zoom chats, we are having a lot of fun with those each Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. And if you'd like to make sure you get the emails that have the links for that chat, you need to join our email address at my email address, and I'll make sure that you get put on that list so that you won't miss anything that's coming up, anything that we need to announce to you. I told you several weeks ago we were hoping to have a live service today. We were originally hoping to have an outdoor service on June 28th, today, but obviously the statistics were not in favor of that. We had to go back and say, no, we can't do that after all. So we're eager to get back to normal, as I'm sure you are eager to get back to normal. But we want to stay in contact with you every way we can and as much as we can. And that leads me to what I want to ask you this morning. I don't usually ask you for something, but you know what? I would love to hear from you. I really miss our Sunday morning experience of getting to shake your hand or give you a hug or see you smile or make you laugh or hear your comments and your compliments. I miss all that. I feel really isolated here this morning, especially when I wake up and my back aches and my joints are creaking. I miss you. And so I would love to hear from you. And if you don't already have my email address, there it is on the screen. It'll be there for just a few more seconds. But I would love for you to drop me a line and just tell me something. Tell me what's going on. Tell me what you miss, what you like. Are these services connecting with you? Are they meaning anything to you? I would like to hear from you this week. So if you feel so led, take a few minutes and drop me a line. I would greatly appreciate it. All right. This morning, the title of my message is Avoiding the Coastline. Now, despite what that might sound like, it has nothing to do with telling you don't go to the beach during COVID-19. That's not what it means at all. It's a little more involved than that. So stick with me and we'll get through how you can avoid the coastline. But to tell you this, I have to tell you a story. Chloe commented earlier on the live chat this morning that she liked my stories. I love stories. I believe that's how we communicate best, how we learn new ideas, how we remember things is through story. So I want to tell you a story this morning about something I invented. Many, many years ago, back near the dawn of civilization, I was working at a church in San Antonio. It was a big church. It was a church that had its own gymnasium. It had an air-conditioned church bus. It had several pastors on the staff. I was the youth minister. And it was a great place, great facilities. I could do just about anything I could imagine because the facilities were so good. And I had been there a couple of years when I got a call from a other end of the spectrum, a much smaller Baptist church in Junction, Texas. Now, Junction, Texas is 65 miles from civilization. The closest town of any size is Kerrville. That's 65 miles. But Junction is all by itself out on I-10 on the way to El Paso. And there's not much around it. There's not much close to it. And so consequently, the people in Junction have had to come up with ways to entertain themselves. They've had to learn how to be self-sufficient. And so I decided to move to Junction and become their music and youth director at First Baptist Church there. They had never had another full-time staff member besides the pastor. So I moved there, and I was single at the time. I was still single. And because I was single and I was the youth director, my house, my apartment became a hangout, excuse me, My house became a hangout for all the teenage boys at the church. And they would come over any hour of the day, sometimes late into the night, just to see what I was doing, to see if I wanted to go with them. And we drove around town. Junction doesn't take long. And we would go to the Dairy Queen, or we would go to the convenience store where a couple of the guys worked. We would go to the little picture show they had there. As I said, they were kind of self-contained. They had their own radio station there, KMBL, the voice of Kimball County. Now, KMBL was not the most powerful station in the world. In fact, KMBL broadcast on power of 1,250 watts. Now, I'm getting a message here that we're having trouble maintaining a connection. So if I go blank for a minute, I'm making sure that what I'm saying is getting through. Okay, that message is gone. So I'm going to repeat the last couple of sentences. Living in Junction, because it was so small, I had the chance to do a lot of things I would never have gotten to do in San Antonio or a larger town. They had their own radio station, 1,250 watts, KMBL, 1,250 watts in the daytime, 250 watts after sundown. I got my own radio show on KMBL once a week, playing contemporary Christian music. Now, as I said, at nighttime, when my show was, they went down to 250 watts. At the time, I had a blow dryer that was 1,250 watts. So I don't know if my radio show even made it into the next block or not. But it was a really cool thing to be able to say, oh, yeah, I have a radio show. Because Junction was so small and I was the new guy in town, and I had some experience being on a stage and speaking and singing, I got to MC 2 years in a row the Miss Kimball County pageant. And boy, what a pageant that was. This was before everybody had video cameras, but boy, I wish I had video of the talent portion of the Miss Kimball County pageant, because some of those young ladies really had to think long and hard to come up with something to do in the talent portion of the pageant. One girl, her talent, she painted herself green like Kermit the Frog and sat on a stool pretending to play the banjo and lip syncing to the Rainbow Connection. And when you think about it, what is the talent there? She's not singing. She's not playing the banjo. Really, the talent is, I painted myself green. She did not win Miss Kimball County, but that's a little indicative of some of the joys of living in a small town and getting to see some cool things. Now, I've told many of you have heard me talk about my almost non-existent sports career. My big brother was an athlete. I was a geek. I was a nerd. I was a band guy. And so I didn't do much in sports, but in Junction, because it was so isolated, I created a sport. And I want to tell you about that sport today. It came about because of how you get to Junction. Now, if you stay just on I-10, you can bypass Junction completely. But if you take the exit that says Business 10, it takes you off of the main interstate, and you go right through the main street of Junction. And when you get off of I-10 and get onto Business 10, you approach Junction from the top of a very big hill. And then there's a pretty steep road that goes down the hill. And then there's this long bridge that crosses the Llano River. Once you cross the bridge, there's a little bit of a left-hand curve, and you're on the main street of the town. Well, I was coming home very late one night from San Antonio. I had a date in San Antonio, and so I was coming home really late. And I got to the top of that tall hill, looking over this scene like you're seeing right there. And I thought, I wonder what would happen if I stopped my car here on top of this hill, and I put it into neutral, and I took my foot off the brake and just let the car begin to coast. I wonder how far I could get. And so it's like 1:30 or 2 in the morning. They've already rolled up the sidewalks in Junction. There's nobody around, no traffic on the road at all. And so I decided to try it. I put my car in neutral. I took my foot off the brake, and very, very slowly my car began to move. And then it began to pick up speed. And then it began to get faster and faster and faster. And when I reached the bottom of that big hill, I was really surprised how fast I was going. I was going 70 miles an hour when I hit the bottom of the hill. 90-degree turn, but a curve that was just enough to make you think, should I tap the brake or not? But I decided to brazen through it. And so when I came to that curve, I didn't hit the brake, and instead I made the curve to the left, and I hit the bridge, and I began going across the bridge. And the bridge had a little bit of an upward incline, so that also would sap your speed. But I was just hoping I would make it across the bridge. Well, I did. When I got to the end of the bridge, there's a little bit of a drop off, which gives you a little bit more speed, but then you make that left curve and you're on Main Street. And I couldn't wait to see how far I would make it down Main Street. A couple of blocks after I came off the bridge, the car began to slow down and finally came to a complete stop. And I thought, well, that was fun. That was really fun. And then I told my teenage boys about it. And of course, they all said, let's go do it. Let's go do it. Let's try my car. Let's take your car. And so this began the sport that we just called coasting, or going for a coast. And we tried out everybody's car. If somebody was getting a new car, they would say, I'll have my new car on Saturday. Let's go for a coast. Okay. And so a bunch of us would pile into the car and drive to the top of that hill and see how far we could go down Main Street. I want to show you what that looks like. As I said, it was before everybody had a video camera in their pocket all the time, but YouTube is a wonderful place. I found 2 videos on YouTube that almost recreate the experience of coming into Junction from that direction. And so you start from a dead stop at the top of the hill and you begin to coast down the hill. Now, this first video takes up at the bottom of that hill, just as you're about to make that left turn. Now, you see where that white truck is. That's where you got to make that left turn. You got to decide if you're going to hit the brake or not. Oh, if you don't hit the brake, you can maintain your speed and start going across the bridge, just hoping you're going to have enough power to make it all the way to the end. The best time we ever had was when we took Stephen Teal's car. He had one of those big old muscle cars of the 70s, and it weighed a ton, especially when it had 6 teenagers crammed into it. And so we were in Stephen's car, and we made it easily across the bridge. Now we're going to switch to a different video here. Somebody just driving down Main Street in Junction. But Stephen's car made it immediately past the bridge. We began going down Main Street, still going at a decent rate of speed. And so we shattered the record. He already had passed where previous cars had failed. And we kept going and kept going. And although the speed is starting to really slack off now, we kept moving. There wasn't a stoplight on this street then, so there was no reason to not continue. It was late at night. There was no traffic around. There was really no danger that we were going to mess with anybody. And so we kept going and going and getting slower and slower and slower until finally we came to the point where the video is going to stop in just a second. There's the Super S. We made it past the Super S, which was probably the world record. But then not far past the Super S, Stephen's car came to a complete stop. As far as I know, he still holds the world's record. And I say as far as I know because I wondered if kids still do this. One of the boys in my youth group that was in on the pioneering of coasting thanks to Facebook, I reconnected with him many years later. He actually became the mayor of Junction. And I emailed him one day and I said, do people still coast down the hill? And he said, my kids still coast down the hill. And that made me feel so good. There was a second generation, and by now, probably a third in Junction, Texas, trying to record or see how far they can go down Main Street. Well, coasting for us on a Friday or Saturday night in Junction, Texas, coasting was a lot of fun. It can be a real entertaining time. But coasting is a terrible way to live your life. Coasting is something that so many people do today, and it's a sad way to live. And before you think, oh, well, you're talking to old people. I'm not just talking to old people. I know young people who have decided, this is about as good as it's going to get. I'm just going to take it as it comes from here on out. I'm not going to exert myself anymore. I'm just going to coast from here to the end. There's not a lot of precedence for that in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament. You look at guys like Noah and Abraham and Moses. I mean, Abraham didn't become a father till he was 100 years old. Moses was 100 years old when he led the children of Israel out of Egypt. But it's not just in the Old Testament that people kept going. There was no concept of retirement. They just kept going and going and going. If anybody ever had an excuse to sit down and rest for a while, it was the Apostle Paul. In 2 Corinthians, he lists some of the things he's gone through. He says, 5 times I received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with sticks. Once I was pelted with stones. And that doesn't mean boys threw rocks at him. That means they threw stones at him, trying to kill him. Once I was pelted with stones. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I spent a night and a day in the open sea. I have been constantly on the move, in danger from rivers, in danger from bandits, in danger from my fellow Jews, in danger from Gentiles, in danger in the city, in danger in the country, in danger at sea, in danger from false believers. I have labored and toiled and often gone without sleep. I've known hunger and thirst and have often gone without food. I have been cold and naked. That's quite an excuse. That's a note that any principal would say, okay, you're all right. Take the day off. But Paul said it not to draw pity. He did it to say, all of that is okay. I'm still going to continue doing what God has called me to do. Consequently, he was the greatest missionary that we've ever known. He spread the gospel more than anybody in history, even to this day. But in one of the letters he wrote, look what he writes toward the end of the letter. He says, look how big I have to write. See how large I have to make the letters. I'm writing this with my own hand. He obviously could barely see anymore. And he said, but I wanted to write to you, even though I have to write so big now because my eyes are failing. Well, coasting is a terrible lifestyle, and yet many of us fall into that trap. How do we stop coasting? What's the problem with coasting? Well, there's a bunch of problems with it. Let me run through those for you. One of the problems with coasting through life is that you're not using the power that is available to you. When you coast in a car, your foot is not on the gas. Your foot is not on the brake. Your foot is on the floor doing nothing. You have so much power available to you in a car. What horsepower you have. How much more power do we have available to us as believers in God, as followers, members of the family of God? We're in touch with such power, and yet most of us are just coasting through, not ever calling on that power. Oh, maybe if things get really, really bad, we'll say, please get me out of this. But we don't draw on the awesome, infinite power available to us. A second problem with coasting through life is this. When you coast, it's all downhill. It's all downhill from here. You're never going to see the mountaintop again if you were ever there. Things are only going to get lower and lower and lower because we can't coast uphill. You can't rest and go up to the top of the mountain. When I was at that big church in San Antonio, some of you ever been to the tracks? I said, no, what are the tracks? And they said, it's this place that's spooky because years ago, a school bus got stalled on the train tracks there, and a train crashed into the school bus and killed a bunch of school kids. And they said, but if you park your car close to the tracks, you can see that it's uphill, but if you put your car in neutral and take your foot off the brake, your car will begin to go uphill. And they said it's because it's the spirits of the dead school kids pushing your car. I said, okay, let's just go see. And so some of the kids knew where it was, south of town, so we go in my car, and we get out there one night, and I parked at the designated spot, nobody around, and I had to admit that looking at the railroad tracks, it looked like it was uphill. And I put my car in neutral and took my foot off the brake, and sure enough, very slowly, the car began to move until it finally went up and over the railroad tracks. And the kids were all like, ooh, they were freaking out. And I said, all right, let's go back and look at this again. And we went back and looked at it, and I showed him it's an illusion. It's an optical illusion because there's a dip there. It looks like the railroad tracks are actually uphill, but they weren't. They were actually still a little bit downhill from where you parked to start. If you think by coasting through life, you're ever going to make it to the mountaintop again, you're having your own kind of illusion. You can't coast uphill. A third problem with coasting through life is this one. You're just not going to make it very far. Oh, you can go pretty fast for a while, but it's eventually going to slow down and stop. Several years ago, when Lindsay graduated from UT and decided she wanted to move to New York City, who do you think got to drive the U-Haul truck with all her stuff? It was me, and I was looking forward to it. I planned out a route that was much further north than I needed to go simply because I wanted to go through a bunch of places I had never been. And I enjoyed the trip immensely, even though I had to cross a mountain range on the way. That was fine, and no problem. It was a gradual climb. The truck made it, no problem. But once I crested the highest part of the mountain range and started on east from there, I noticed that I was going downhill for a long time. Maybe 3 hours. I hardly had to touch the accelerator. I was coasting for 3 hours, and I thought, wow, I'm going to have great gas mileage today. This is wonderful. But you know what? Eventually, no matter how fast you may be going and how effortless it may seem at the time, the coasting will eventually stop. And you will come to a complete stop unless you do something different about it. Every mile takes you further from the mountaintop. And a fourth thing that's wrong with coasting is this: your options. Your options are very limited. Any bump or curve can ruin everything. This is so true in the car. When we're coasting down the hill outside a junction, if that curve onto the bridge scared you a little bit and you decided to just tap your brake, that was going to kill your speed. You probably wouldn't make it to the other end of the bridge. As we coast through life, there are so many people I have known who say, oh, I have a strong faith, I'm a believer, and then there's a bump in the road. They lose their job. They lose a loved one. They experience financial ruin. There's a bump in the road, and all of a sudden, their power is completely gone. They sometimes just veer right off the road into a tree because they can't handle the bump or the curve in the road because they were just coasting and not maintaining their power through the tough times. You're not accumulating any new power when you coast. You're just going through the motions. Problem number 5 with coasting through life: you'll get slower and slower, and then you'll just stop. If you don't like to be reminded of your own mortality, and slower, and then you'll just stop. If you don't like to be reminded of your own mortality, coast is the worst, because every day is just like the one before, except a little bit slower. What a terrible way to live. Saying today is the best it's ever going to get, even though it's not as good as it was yesterday. I'll just get used to living with each day a little bit less, a little bit less, a little bit less. You think that sounds like an abundant life? You think that sounds like the life Jesus intends for us to have? No. We don't want to get slower and slower until we stop. Problem number 6, if you're coasting, everybody with you is going to coast too. See, we often think, well, what I do doesn't affect anybody but me, and if I decide I'm just going to coast from here, it's nobody's business. Yeah, it is. People watch you. People learn from you. People make decisions based on what they see you do. And if they see you give up and say, yeah, I'm just going to take it easy, they may never discover their own path. They may never discover their reason for being here. They may just say, if you're going to coast, I'm going to coast too. Your example will have an influence, whether it's positive or negative. There's a story you probably heard me tell before, because I love this story. Several years ago, there was a woman who ran the New York City Marathon. She was 86 years old, Joy Johnson. She was the oldest person to ever finish the New York City Marathon, even though she fell along the way. She had a bad fall along the way. She picked herself up and she finished at 86 years of age. She set a new record. She made it into the Guinness Book. But she went home that evening and she laid down and she died. Now, sometimes when I tell that story, people go, oh, no. Oh, that's so sad. Are you kidding? That's the best way to leave this life, I think, is to hit a peak, set a record, do something you've never done before, and then say, I'm ready. Check me out. I'm done. I would so much rather do that, hit a peak and say, I did something new, I did something great. I'd rather say, today is the best day of my life, and die tomorrow. I'd so much rather do that than spend the last 20 or 30 years sitting in a nursing home somewhere saying, well, 30 years ago, I used to be somebody. I instead want to say, today is the best day of my life. You realize Jesus' ministry, his ministry time on earth was only 9% of his life. He did all the great things he did in the last 9% of his life. So if you're coasting through your life now, what can you do? Well, you need to put your foot down. You need to stop at what you're doing and say, I'm going to make a turn. I'm going to make a change. I'm going to do something different instead of just doing the same thing over and over again. You need to get yourself in gear. You need to tap into the power that's available to you. And then you need to apply that power to help you make this change and help you go the distance you need to go. Another important thing is you need to choose a destination. It doesn't make any sense to hit the gas and see how fast you can go if you have no idea where you're heading. What's your destination? What's your goal? What do you want to achieve with your life? And then don't stop. Don't stop until you reach the end. As long as you're alive, as long as you have breath, as long as you have thought, you are still able to do something. You are still able to influence others, to love others, to be a faithful servant, to God, you never become exempt from that, or too old, or too tired, or too bored, or too weak. Now, here's the pertinent point. Right now, it would be easy for all of us to say, how am I supposed to stop coasting when right now I'm stuck in the garage? I can't even get out of the garage thanks to COVID-19. Well, my answer to that is, if you can't get out of the garage, maybe you need to clean up the garage while you have the chance. I know at our house, we've done more cleaning in the last couple of months than we've done in the last couple of years because we have time to focus on and nothing is competing for our attention. So during this virus time, you can clean up the garage. You can clean up your life. I am always flabbergasted about people that say, I can't have a good time unless I'm able to go out to the bar every night. Well, you need to discover how to have a good time then. You need to realize there's more to life than dulling yourself, drugging yourself to make yourself feel like you're happy. Clean up the garage. Tune up the vehicle that is you. Maybe some of you have lost weight during this time. I wish I could say that. We're maintaining. But some of you have started walking. Chloe walks 10,000 steps a day, and she's supposed to be inside all the time. You can still improve yourself. One thing I have done, I've read so many books in the last 4 months, much more than I have read in the past several years. Another thing you can do while you're stuck in the garage, you can research the possibilities of what you can do when you get out. What's your plan? What's your goal? Who could you influence? Who could you help with your life? Reach out to somebody else. You can still give somebody a call. You can still drop somebody a line. You can still send somebody a picture to give them a smile, to make them feel your affection for them, to make them feel that they are still remembered and loved. I love the things that people have come up with to do during this virus. The people who put a teddy bear in their window so that kids walking by can go on a bear hunt and see how many bears they can find on the street. The people who put signs in their yard that are clever or amusing that you smile at when you go by. There are always ways to reach out no matter what the situation is. You can always continue to reach out to others. So today, what's your choice? What could you do? What could you do in your life if you were to stop coasting? Maybe you would discover that you didn't have to be on the same road day after day after day, looking at the same scenery, the same familiar sights. Instead, you could decide, I want to go somewhere else. You might discover that you can fly. You might discover that you can soar above anything you ever dreamed you could do. But you're never going to discover that unless you stop coasting. Get your life out of neutral and decide where you want to go and what you want to do. Avoid the coastline. That's my time. That's more than my time. I'm long-winded today, but I appreciate you being here, and I'll be praying for you. I ask you to be praying for me, that all of us will stop coasting and do the amazing things God has empowered us to do. We will see you next time. Love wins.